Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Honor to him, the blessed one, the worthy one, the fully enlightened one. My utmost respect to the perfectly enlightened Sammasambuddha, the noble doctrine of the Buddha, and the noble Mahasangha, the disciples of the Buddha. Dear Dhamma friends, welcome to our weekly guest lecture series. Under this weekly guest lecture series, we will cover up current and modern topics related to Buddhism to help benefit our community around the world. I believe this effort by DHAMMA USA is going to help the community to apply Buddhist teachings in a more practical level. It is an honor today to have a distinguished guest lecturer with us to present this week's topic. Our guest lecturer today, who has kindly accepted our invitation to talk about the series of Dhamma sharing, is a medical doctor specializing in cardiology and a Buddhist practitioner, as well as a mediator. She also prefers to stay with no more formal introduction. Good evening, doctor, and welcome back to this week's guest lecture series on behalf of Dhamma USA.
Good evening.
Today's topic is Practical Steps to the Path of Nibbana, Part 4 of 4. Please mark your calendar every Thursday at 6 p.m. Pacific Time to get benefited from the guest lecture series. Kindly check with Dhamma USA YouTube channel and Facebook page, as well as Facebook groups for more updates. Let's get started on today's lecture, and please kindly post your questions in the comment sections of Dhamma USA YouTube channel. Our guest lecturer will answer them at the end of the talk. Without further ado, let me invite our guest lecturer, Doctor, to start her presentation.
Theruvan Saranai, this will be our fourth and the final part of this series, which is the practical steps you need to take to attain Nibbana. So, we'll start with a recap of what we have learned. So, attaining Nibbana basically means training our mind to see things as they truly are. And we learn that there are 4 stages: stream enterer, once returner, non-returner, and Nibbana. And in this pathway, the very first step is learning to be the best person you can be. And then we learn that the next thing is we have to train our mind to be the best tool it can be. And then we went through a whole series of things that we have to train our mind to see differently. So let's go through those. The first fact was that we have 2 main parts. We have a mind and we have a body. And then we learned that our body is made out of 4 elements. What are they? Solid, liquid, air, energy. And then we learned that not only our body, everyone else's body, trees, inanimate objects, and the whole universe is in fact made out of these 4 elements. So that's another thing we have to train our mind to see. And then we went into a little bit of a depth on how the mind works, and at the end came up with the understanding that everything that happens inside the mind is also impermanent and it's constantly changing. Remember, a thought comes, a thought goes, so on and so forth. Then we went even dive deeper into the process that works on how we see something like a yellow rose and realize that process itself is also an impermanent and temporary, transient process. So that's where we stopped. So today we will talk about a few other concepts and move forward. So, the first concept is a very simple one, which we've already talked about, which is about impermanence. Or for me, the word constantly changing makes more logical sense. So, this is something we already know and we have seen in our own lives. Remember a photograph of yourself when you were a little baby, and then a child, and then in university, and now, or think of your grandparents, and then people die. So basically this cycle is something that we all have seen in our lives. And now I want you to pause for a second. Not only like human beings, you and me and everyone else, even other things in this universe. Let's talk about a tree. You see that there is a cycle, it's constantly changing, and it is impermanent. If you think of an inanimate object like a chair, sooner or later it's going to disintegrate, and that too will change. And even our Mother Earth, if we think about it, one day that too will be gone. So everything, if we pause and just think, is constantly changing, and therefore it's impermanent. Now, you and some of us have done science and we've talked about cells. Even if you think at that level, we know that every day, even in our own body, cells die, new cells are born, and that's a constant thing that's happening. It's the same out any plant. And if you are a chemist, you can even go deeper and think of an atom, think of the protons and electrons, and you know that the electrons are constantly changing. So even at that level, we know that things are changing, and basically it's not some weird fact, it's something we all already know. So, bottom line conclusion, everything is impermanent and everything is constantly changing, and we have actually seen it with our own eyes. There is nothing exotic about this concept. Now, I want you to pause for a second and think of a little child building a sand castle in the beach, and then the waves will come and wash them away, and then the child will start crying because didn't expect that to happen. But you and I as adults, we won't cry because we know that it's inevitable. The sand castle is going to get washed away. So we are not going to cry or feel sad about it because we know that it's a fact. The waves will come and it will wash away. So now think about how foolish we are because we just talked our body, our mind, our friends and everybody else's body and their mind, trees, inanimate objects, the whole universe is constantly changing. So they are like sand castles, except somehow or another it hasn't gone into our heads. So we think that they have to be permanent, and we don't want them to change. So we are really like a child building a sandcastle on the beach. And that is the reason we bring this stress and suffering on ourselves because of this wrong perception that we have. So, this is what the simplest way you can understand it, and that's all that matters. So, basically, we've realized everything is changing, but we are not willing to accept that. And that is what gives rise to the stress and suffering. So, what Lord Buddha said is, if I can train my mind to see things as they truly are, which is that things are constantly changing and there is nothing permanent, well, guess what? We will be watching at things like that sandcastle getting washed away in the beach. It will not give us this stress and suffering. So that's a very simplified way of understanding this whole concept. Okay, so in this whole series, we went through 3 steps, right? We learned a concept. Then we had to figure out, as scientists, how are we going to get our mind to observe these, mostly our mind and our body, and see whether these concepts are true. So now, just now, the concept we talked about is impermanence. So let's keep building a module to be like a scientist and see how are we going to train our mind to see this. There's 2 methods. I personally prefer the first one, but I will also explain the second one. So the first one that when I meditate, I usually think about an image from childhood and maybe when I was going to school and then in university and now, and you realize that we have changed. Very easy way for me to think about impermanence. And then my mother passed away in 2019, and so I have that vivid image. And at the end, what in Sri Lanka we get the ashes. So basically, her body became part of Mother Earth. So that is something that is very recent in my memory, and I'm sure you could think of someone, a loved one that has passed on. And if you think of that as part of your contemplation, starting with your own childhood photograph, it makes it very easy for us to understand and contemplate about impermanence. Now, there are a little bit more exotic ways of looking at impermanence, which you will come across. One of them is the act of anapanasati or the breath meditation. So, if you really logically look at that, what you see is you see the breath coming in and then you see it going away. So even that process itself is an impermanent process. So some people can contemplate about impermanence that way. Personally, it doesn't quite resonate with me. So you are a unique individual. You have to choose something and a method that resonates with you. But the concept that we are going to train our mind is the fact that everything is impermanent and constantly changing. There's another technique where you could just listen as you are contemplating. You hear a sound, the ear receives it, but the mind analyzes and concludes what it is, and then it's gone. So another process that is impermanent. So these are other methods that are described, but to me, the first and the most obvious one is just thinking back and realizing how we have changed and how our own loved ones have passed on. So that is so easy for us to think about. So that is an easy contemplation about the impermanence and the constant change of our body. Now we are going to touch on two other big concepts. The first one is a concept called Sakaya Ditti, and the next one, which is very close to it, is Anatta or Anatma, uh, etc. So it's that word. So let's see what those two are. So Sakaya Ditti, this is the easiest way that we can understand this concept. But before we do that, if you are in a safe place, just pause for a moment and think about you, and you will get a sense that there is a boss called me inside our body or inside our mind who's like manipulating and doing stuff. This is a perception we have. So I want you to pause for a second. You can even say your name, and you will get this sense that there is a boss called me in our body or our mind. Okay? So now let's dive deeper. When you get that sense that there is a boss hiding somewhere, let's actually look at it objectively. So look at your brain and see, is there really a boss called me hiding in the brain? How about the face, the chest, the abdomen? And you will see that really there is no boss in there. It's just an organ, four elements, and really there is no boss. So little by little, you can go through your whole body, and then you realize, there is no boss called me hiding anywhere in the body. And as I said, if you have been following our series of lectures and if you have been doing a little contemplation about the four elements, by now, this is fourth week, you should be getting a sense that yes, our body is made out of the four elements, and really there is no boss call me hiding anywhere in the body. And now let's look at the mind. Remember, we talked about several methods of observing the mind, and we saw that the mind was just a thought comes, a thought goes, a thought comes, a thought goes. Now, when you really look at that process, did you see a boss call me hiding in there? You don't. So there is no boss call me hiding in the mind. And we also know there was no boss call me hiding in the body. But this is bizarre because we have this sense. So, what is it, and where is this boss call me hiding? So, we've looked, as I said, there is no boss in the body, there is no boss in the mind, there is no boss in the thoughts, and there is no boss in the feelings. We've already looked at those places, but again, we have this sense. And then you pause and realize, oh my gosh, it is just a mental construct, just a collection of thoughts that give us that sense that there is a boss call me. So it's really a mental construct. And you don't have to be a rocket scientist to understand it. If you pause and really think logically, you can see that. So then you realize, oh my gosh, this is the wrong view. So remember the word view, and Sakaya Ditti, the word Ditti means view, and this Sakaya Ditti means that we have the sense that there is a permanent entity called me hiding somewhere in our body or our mind. Again, Sakaya Ditti means we think that there is a permanent entity called me hiding somewhere in our body or our mind. Now, in the last few minutes, we realize that's the wrong view. So, this is what Sakaya Ditti is, and it is a wrong view. Now, in our first part, we talked about the 4 stages, and the first one was called stream mentor. And what that means is, now if we, in that, you will see that once we attain so one or the stream mentor stage, we will eliminate the concept called Sakaya Ditti. Okay, so stream mentor, we eliminate the concept called Sakaya Ditti. Now you know what that is in theory, right? So as we go through the 3 stages that we talked about, in a theoretical way, now you understand that there is no permanent boss called me, either inside our body or mind. Theoretically, you understand this. Now we have to be like scientists and start actually seeing and contemplating and trying to realize, is this really true? So, using our modular method of meditation, you can start looking at it. And once you actually complete that experiment yourself and you look in your mind and your body and you confirm that there is no permanent boss called me, that's when you eliminate the concept of Sakaya Ditti. Okay, let's move forward. So now you understood another part, another concept. Now, this is another concept you have to understand, which is anatta. Now, again, we know that there is no permanent entity called me inside the body or the mind, and we called it Sakaya Ditti. But there is this sense of self, that there is something inside us, and it is like deeply embedded in our mind. So it's not easy to eliminate that. You can eliminate the view, but it's the elimination of the sense of self happens only when you attain Nibbana. I had one of the Buddhist priests share a really nice example, like having a fire on top of a large boulder. So you can eliminate the fire, but the heat inside the boulder will be there for quite some time. So, likewise, you can understand theoretically, and you can also observe during your contemplation that there is no permanent boss called me inside our body or our mind, but that sense of self, well, that takes a lot longer to eliminate. And we will talk about how we can do that. But that sense of self, self is Atma, and that sense of self will still be with us in our memory database. Now, to put it in another way, remember in the last lecture we talked about a thought, and there was a group of companions around a thought, and we call them Chaitasika, and we put 2 of them along with Vijnana in room 1 in their office, and in the second room we put all the other 50 along with a boss, right? So, and we called it the Department of Sanskara. And I also said, even if you forget everything, in that first room, there is that little guy called Sanya or perception. And I said, please don't forget him. So that's kind of where we were. Now let's go a little bit deeper into that concept and focus on this boss and Sanya. So the sense of self, or the boss called me, is deeply indebted where? Sanya's database, and it is really in multiple places. So what we are trying to do is eliminate this wrong data entry point from our mind. Okay, so we have to clean up this database, and that's basically what we are trying to do. So now you hopefully will have a better understanding of what we need to do. And how do we do that? Well, there's two methods and we'll talk about it, but the more you practice, obviously the better you get in trying to eliminate those wrong entries in our database. Okay. Now, another concept. Remember in those two office rooms, on the second room, which is the Department of Sanskara, there was a boss, right? Who is this boss? That boss is a illusion called me. And when the boss retires, Chetana in the Department of Sanskara can retire too. Do you see the connection? And when the boss retires, Tanha, who is a secretary in the Department of Sanskara, can retire too. So this is another way of understanding why it is so important for us to eliminate those two wrong entries in our database. Okay? So once we eliminate the sense of self, that is called, now self is called Atma. Elimination of that is called Anatma or Anatta, depending on different pronunciations. But what I want is for you to understand the concept, which is what we are trying to do is eliminate the sense of self. And now you understand what that means. Basically, eliminating and cleaning up our own database. Okay. Now, we actually learned about two errors. One, we have this sense that a lot of things around us, our body, our friends, everything in the universe is permanent. And we saw that that's not the case. Second thing is that we have someone, a boss called me, somewhere in our body or our mind or somewhere. And that is the second error in the database. So now you understand the theory and you know how to look at the mind and do this experiment. And then you have to keep repeating and correcting these things until the database gets cleaned up. And once you completely clean up the database, we attain Nibbana. Now comes the next question. Can we actually remove something that is in a database in our mind and replace it with a new concept? Is this possible? Well, guess what? We do it all the time. So, yes, we can do it. Here is the example. Let's say you had a friend and her name was Miss Tina Smith. Okay? And then she got married. So the next time she comes into the office, You see her image, and immediately your mind says, Tina Smith. But then you pause and say, oops, no, she got married. So now her new name is Mrs. Tina Jones, right? So you see her, and immediately Tina Smith comes to mind. You pause, you correct it, and you say Tina Jones. And the more you keep correcting and you say that, maybe in about 3 months, when you see her, the first thing that comes to mind is Mrs. Tina Jones. And you might even forget her maiden name. So in our little diagram here in the bottom, you see the two roads. We are so used to walking on a certain path, but if we stop that and we keep correcting our mistake and keep walking on the other path, sooner or later the old path will disappear and we'll be able to walk on this new path. So we had to keep correcting, we had to keep reminding until we eliminate the old path. Just like you remembered that Miss Tina Smith is now Mrs. Tina Jones. Okay, it's the same technique. So again, it's common sense, and we do this every day. So what are the methods we use and what are the methods we can use to make this happen, to correct the database, to get this new data in and get rid of the old wrong data? There's two specific methods. One is repeated contemplations at times of meditation, and then that is called vipassana, which is another name of saying repeated contemplation. Okay. And then the second thing is a phrase that I added called Buddhist mindfulness, because the word mindfulness is now spreading all over the world and different meanings are being brought into that. But we have to do a specific kind of mindfulness in order to eliminate the wrong data entry points in our mind. Okay, so hence the reason I coined the word Buddhist mindfulness. So first let's recap and put together the meditation that we should do, and it takes maximum 15 minutes. So friends, there is no reason why you cannot start doing this today. Okay, absolutely no reason. And then you repeat it, and the more you repeat, the better you get. Okay, so let's go through that. This is the final putting together of our meditation technique. Again, you sit comfortably. Please make sure you are in a safe place and make sure that all of the urgent things are out of the way, okay? And then you can relax. You pay homage to Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha. And then, as I said, traditionally, I'm from Sri Lanka, we recite the 5 precepts. And this, as I mentioned before, is something I personally do. I take a deep breath, let it out, and tell my mind, okay, for the next 15, 20 minutes, I'm going to put everything aside and focus on this meditation contemplation. Okay. Now we start to calm our mind, which is like a stormy ocean, and try to get it a little bit calmer, maybe like a calm lake. And as I said, I personally use the compassion meditation followed by a few minutes. Please don't get stuck here. A lot of people just get stuck here and do not move on to the contemplative meditation. And now you see that's the more important thing, okay? But you can do a little bit of breath meditation and calm yourself down. Now, throughout, I said when you are doing your compassion meditation, say May the brain be well, may the face be well, may the chest be well, so on and so forth, and delete the word my brain, my face. Now, do you understand why we deleted the word my? Because that would push us to go in that wrong path, reinforcing the wrong database. We are trying to eliminate the word my brain. So, hence the reason I said use the brain, the face, and that way we will even there start seeing that this body is an autonomous thing while we are trying to calm our mind. So, we are doing two things at the same time by eliminating the word my from the compassion meditation. Okay. Next, what did we do? We looked at our body and saw that it was made out of solid, liquid, air, energy. And then we were very methodically, we went and looked at the brain. Again, this is not a chant. We are actually looking and seeing, yes, there are solid elements, liquid, air, energy. Solid, liquid, air, energy, so on and so forth. So you gradually go through the whole body. Then right arm, right leg, left arm, left leg. Now you have the four element part of the meditation. Then you look at someone else. Now remember, we are trying to clean up our database. So here it's important to look at someone different almost every day. Okay, if you keep focusing on the same person and thinking that okay, that person's body is made out of the four elements, that part of the database will get corrected, but everyone else will remain the same. So it's important for you to look at different people almost on a daily basis as you do this. Look at a tree, inanimate object, earth, etc. And then that is the four element component of this contemplation. Next, I personally look at now, because we are contemplating about our body, think of an image from childhood and when I'm going to school, university, so on and so forth. And then I think of my mother and her passing. So therefore, I realize that this body is impermanent and one day will end up as part of Mother Earth. So that's the one I use. And then I think of someone else and contemplate about their impermanence, think of a tree, inanimate object, and the universe, and realize, yes, everything else is also impermanent and is constantly changing. Then you think of your own mind. Remember, we talked about two systems, but by now you have seen that your thoughts are very temporary and transient and constantly changing. So you acknowledge that fact and pause for a moment and contemplate about that. And then we talked about how data comes in and you sense it from your sense organs, and then it's interpreted by the mind. And then we went into the process of how that happens, but that too is impermanent. So if you hear the sound, now you go one step further and you hear the sound, came and stuck your ear, and then your mind interpreted what it was. But now you also acknowledge the fact that, yep, that too was a transient process, because once the sound disappears, that thought disappears and everything is gone. So you realize that those sensory data inputs and the processing of the data is also an impermanent process. Then you pause for a second and then think about all this data is, we think that is permanent, but really it's not, and we've seen it now. So it is really a very foolish thing for us to think that these are going to stay there forever, and that is where the stress and suffering starts. And then I personally try to show my mind in a very methodical way, look, there is no boss called me hiding in the brain. You actually look to see whether there's a boss. You don't just say it. You actually look at the brain and realize it's just something made out of the four elements. There is no boss called me in that brain. So is there a boss called me in the face? You ask that question and you answer that, and then you go down slowly, convincing and showing your mind that there is no boss call me hiding anywhere from head to toe. Then you pause and think about the mind and the thoughts and realize, okay, there is no boss call me in my mind either. By now, what happens is, if you've been meditating for a little time, the frequency of thoughts start slowing down. And then this was mentioned by Ajahn Sumedho, and it's really a good technique to end your meditation. Basically, you say to yourself very slowly, I pause, am, pause, and then your name. When you say that, you realize, because you are now looking at the brain, at the mind, that when you say I, it was just one thought. When you say am, it is just one thought. And then your name, that's another thought. So you start seeing for yourself, wow, these are just thoughts. There was no boss, no person there. And another thing, we have multiple identities, me being a doctor, so I can say I pause, am, pause, pause, doctor or engineer or housewife or student, whatever. And then you watch your mind and you start seeing, and it is amazing, you start seeing that they are just thoughts, just thought, one thought after another. There is no person or a boss there. Or you could say, this is my home. Again, they are just individual thoughts. So you should do this only towards the end, and it is fascinating how you start seeing that these are just thoughts. Okay, so we talked about two methods. So, in trying to clear our database, so we talked about repeated contemplation. Now you have the structure of one method of doing that contemplation. And as I said, this whole thing takes about 15 minutes, okay? And all of us can find 15 minutes. So please keep doing that. To me, I prefer that method. The second method is Buddhist mindfulness. Now, that requires a whole 1 hour, but I'm going to give you the principles of how we can use the concept of Buddhist mindfulness in cleaning up this database. Okay? So, Buddhist mindfulness is like a Swiss Army knife. It can be used in multiple ways for us to achieve this ultimate goal. So let's go through the different ways we can do that. Remember the story about Miss Tina Smith? Okay, so what really happened in our mind? What happened was, we saw Miss Tina Smith, which basically means we saw the image. And then what happened? We associated it with from our database, went in and then looked at all the stuff and then realized, oh, Miss Tina Smith. right? That is an awareness state. And now the mindfulness kicks in and realizes you saw the image and you named it Miss Tina Smith. We haven't still completed our work here. So knowing that you attach that name is the new thing that you are going to do, because otherwise all these years what happened to us was this was just happening. But now we are being more observant about how the mind works, and we see the mere fact of seeing Miss Tina Smith made us associate it. And then what do? Next, another thought came in and said, hey, wrong association, because remember, she got married and her name was changed to Miss Tina Jones now, and that's what needs to come out of your mouth, right? So there was a correction. So you first had an awareness of what your first thoughts were, and then you actually actively made a correction, and that's what came. So there is an analytical awareness and a correction. Now, that whole thing is what we have to keep doing in order to clean our database. Because remember, our tendency is to go in our old path, and what we are trying to do is to recreate a new path and delete those old wrong data entry points from our memory and our mind. Okay, so this is what we did, and that's what we have to do in this context as well. Now, in the Satipatthana Sutra, for the longest time, I couldn't quite comprehend, because there is something that said you have to start being aware about your postures, whether you are seated, standing, walking, or lying down. And basically, because all these years, we have been focusing on the outside, you have to get some baby steps in there. So this is an easy way of training your mind to be more aware of you. Okay, but this doesn't fix the problem. It's just like a little baby training method that is mentioned here, because you now understand the whole thing that needs to happen. This took a long time for me to really understand, so now you should understand it very well. To be honest with you, you should constantly try. But I personally, this is my personal observation. If you do those tiny little contemplative meditation things, which are relatively easy to do, you start noticing that that's a much easier way to correct our database. And then the mindfulness also becomes a little bit easier, because the frequency of thoughts starts slowing down. So it becomes a little bit easier to be more mindful. And to be honest with you, do more of this, and then the second the mindfulness starts becoming easier. Now I'm going to give you, so remember I told you Buddhist mindfulness is like a Swiss Army knife. So I'm just touching superficially, but so that you understand the different ways that you can use this tool. And it's up to you to use it in whatever the way you want to. Step one. Remember, our step one is learning to be the best person you can be. How can we use Buddhist mindfulness in this part? Think you feel a mosquito bite you, and what's your immediate initial urge is to kill it, right? And then you notice, oops, the mosquito bit me and my hand is going to kill the mosquito. That awareness is the mindfulness. And then you say, no, I'm not going to kill it. It's not the correct thing to do. So therefore, you gently touch it and brush it off. So you corrected that initial urge and the action and redirected it to the correct path. See how that works? So that is Buddhist mindfulness at work. You feel like telling an untruth, you pause and say, nope, not a good thing to do. Therefore, I'm not going to say it. Got it? So, this is how one method of using Buddhist mindfulness, which you are already doing. The second thing is, remember I told you that we learn a concept. Now we have to be like scientists and start seeing whether the concept we learned is an accurate one, right? So how can we use Buddhist mindfulness in that situation? The Swiss Army knife at work. So this is a very common thing that, let's say you are just hanging around waiting for a friend to come. You hear a noise. You're not meditating, you are just at work or wherever. And for a moment, you can notice, okay, heard it through the ear, but the interpretation came from the mind. And you can just transiently start seeing how the mind is directing the body, again confirming the fact that yes, the theoretical concepts we learned were in fact true. So that's another way you use Buddhist mindfulness. And you're doing these things. So I'm just bringing them to your attention. I'm not trying to tell you something you didn't know. These are things you know. I'm just making you aware of how you are using it. Another thing is, remember we learned that it's the mind that directs the body to do things, right? So think of an occasion, if you are aware, you suddenly get, feels like having a cookie. And then only will you get up and go to get the cookie. So what happened there? It's the thought that preceded the action. So you start by being mindful about what you are thinking, you are beginning to see how the body acts. And then you can, if it is the wrong action, you do have the luxury of correcting it, because now you became aware of that thought. Another example, this is the ultimate use of Buddhist mindfulness, and this is the hardest one, because remember, our goal is to eliminate the old pathway and start creating the new pathway, like Miss Tina Jones to Miss Tina Smith to Mrs. Tina Jones. Same concept. So we have to start retraining the mind when we see the mind coming up with the wrong thoughts, telling the body to carry out wrong actions. So this becomes the ultimate way that we correct this database. Another more deeper method of using mindfulness is in things like, let's see, things like impermanence and sense of self. How do we use that knowledge in, say, eliminating desire? So you get this desire, now you are aware that you got that desire. So now you have to do some action and stop something bad happening, right? Let's say you saw this beautiful gem. This is an exaggeration, but to get a point across, and you feel like stealing it because it is so beautiful. So You now, with Buddhist mindfulness, start seeing, okay, got the desire, okay, trying to steal, bad move, back off, right? Or you could say that gem is made out of the four elements, it's impermanent. Or you could say, look at your body, it's made out of four elements. Look at your mind, it's a transient collection of thoughts, and there is no me that wants the gem. There's multiple ways that you can start correcting yourself using this framework, and it's limitless. So these are methods. Please don't get overwhelmed. Do one thing. I personally have stuck to the four elements for the body, four elements for the mind, impermanence of the mind. Therefore, there is no me. So, this is a common sequence that I've decided I'm going to use. So, even if I'm like just looking out of the window, I see someone, you can just contemplate about that someone and show their mind that there's four elements, impermanent thoughts that are like coming and going, and there is no permanent entity in that body. So these are like, create your own little techniques and stick with one, because what's important is to practice often. Okay. I haven't done it, but I hope to have a much more broader post on Buddhist mindfulness, and it'll be at this website. So please jot it down, tinyurl.com/ Path to Nibbana. And I will go deeper into that, but you really don't have to, because all the concepts are the ones that we just talked about. Final big question, something that we all ask. Am I making progress? So you keep doing this thing mechanically, and then these are little clues that you will have yourself. Okay, this is not something that you start talking to others. This is something you check within you and just check to see, am I doing the correct thing? One thing that you will notice is that your frequency of thoughts are reduced, and therefore you're able to focus on a task much better. A very simple thing, but I also told you, I think in our second lecture, please be careful, especially if you're driving. Okay. um, the action reaction ratio, this change, and you have to do some adaptation to that. So please be aware of it, especially if you are driving in heavy traffic. You will also notice that your greed, desire, anger, they start going down, and you will notice this. So this is not something you keep asking other folks. You just notice these things. And then there will be times that you yourself will start saying, yep, the mind is different, the body is different, it's two elements. And you start seeing this, not just like theoretically, you start kind of realizing it. And when you see something, not always, but the more you repeat, the better this process will become. But these are tiny little landmarks that you can and you will start seeing. So now you understand the theory, you have a real simple method, so you have zero excuse to do this. And then you also understand that it's not rocket science. If I got through these 3 points, I won this battle. So this is what I really wanted to do. Okay, final summary. Number one, now you know we can attain Nibbana. So please focus, be determined, and please don't listen to naysayers. And you also know that it is all common sense. And the only way to get there is with repeated contemplation and repeated times of Buddhist mindfulness. And a third thing, like, when we were studying, one of the things we did was we went back and read the same thing over and over again. The videos that I created at tinyurl.com/Path to Nibbana, I myself sometimes go and listen to them over and over again, because that too reinforces these facts and helps us get better at them. So it doesn't matter what method you use, keep repeating these contemplations, keep listening to sermons, and keep practicing short episodes of Buddhist mindfulness and correcting the database, because every time you do that, you are deleting a little bit of that error that we have in our database. And finally, stay humble, because the moment you stop being humble, you will stop learning. So please stay humble, learn from each other, and also help and nurture each other. So these are very important reminders. Well, that's all. That's our last part 4 of this practical steps to Nibbana. And I'm open for any Q&A you have. Thank you. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Doctor, for your presentation. We have now successfully completed the lecture of practical steps to the path of Nibbana. I'm sure all of our Dhamma friends around the world were benefited from this lesson. I personally have learned a lot and will have some practice to do after this. Looks like we have a couple questions. The question from Alia: can meditation help people grieving the loss of their loved ones? It might help at the moment, but I feel that grieving the loss of my loved one is a lifetime suffering. Thank you.
Yes. Yes. You are absolutely right. But if you just mechanically do this process, you will realize at multiple levels, and you will go through the grieving, but you will realize that there was a body that is impermanent, there was a mind that is impermanent, so there is nothing permanent. So this is part of life. Now it's easy for me to say this, and yes, I still grieve the loss of my mom, so I'm not saying that you are all of a sudden trying to have this uh, relief come over you, but it's something you can remind yourself and comfort yourself. And the more you do that, the easier it becomes. So there's multiple ways that you can help with your grieving. I hope that answers your question. Okay. So, possible to train our mind to face our own death peacefully. Um, to be honest with you, I don't know the answer to that, and I would not pretend to know the answer to that. But one thing I know about being alive is, as you contemplate and you train yourself in this method, you don't have those like immense greed, immense anger. So I am hoping as you practice more and more, death will become peaceful. But to exactly like definitely say yes, I don't know the answer. But I think it will be easier for us to face our own death if we practice this.
A comment from Indica. This is a very beautiful talk series. Thank you so much, Dhamma USA. Thank you, Doctor, for your generosity and kindness to share the Dhamma in a simple and meaningful ways.
Thank you.
Another question. Are you teaching Vipassana?
Okay. So I intentionally didn't use that word, but that whole contemplation, that is vipassana. Okay, so when you contemplate about the four elements in your body, in other people, when you contemplate about and watch your um, thoughts, they come and they go, that's chittanupassana. That is another form of vipassana. So I use the word contemplation because it's an easier word for me, but that is what vipassana is, contemplation about these facts that we learn. So you now have a structure that you can go and refer to and practice very easily rather than getting bogged down in complicated, complex systems, because this is very easy and you have zero excuse not to do it.
Indica said, how to balance the work and meditation. Can you guide, please?
Yes. I will share some very practical things. I kind of alluded to them during the talk as well. Number one, have a designated time, and that's very important. Number two, if you are overwhelmed with some kind of a work or task, please finish that, or give yourself permission to stop thinking about it for 15 minutes. That's all you need. And we have 15 minutes. That's number two. Number three is uh, I learned this from Karaniyametta Sutra, which is a very popular sutra. One of the first things that Lord Buddha had mentioned is cut down your responsibilities. So be practical. It took me at least about 10 years to back off on all the obligations to get to a point where I can focus more of my energy on this. So it's a long term plan for us because, you know, since childhood, we've been trained in a different way to get more. Get more responsibilities, get more money, get more this, that, and the other. And you do have to be frugal. At the same time, we have to live, so we have to have money. I'm not saying you should stop earning money, but have a plan and make that also a task where you always double check to see, am I taking on things that I don't really need or things that really mess you up? So delete those things and be all the time aware and back off on those. So now you have a time, you are no longer restless at that time, so you can do this while you are working. And the third thing is, remember, our ultimate goal is to clean that database. So even say in between work, you're waiting for a office worker to come, you can contemplate about your body and say that you have four elements. There is nothing to prevent you do that. It's not like, okay, put a board up and say, I'm meditating. You can do these anywhere, anytime. Contemplation is something that could be done anytime, just once. And each time you do it, you are one step ahead of this game. So every day you make progress. So the answer is yes, you can, and keep working at it.
Great. In the beginning, our mind was empty. There was no data. So why we entered to the birth process?
Okay. Too complicated to answer, and uh, I would rather not answer that one. Sorry.
Let me see. Okay, so I think this next one, doctor, is actually a question from me personally.
Yes.
When we sleep, is our mind meditating as well? Also, can meditation be done while driving on the road?
Okay. So meditating while sleeping, again, theoretically speaking, it's an active process, right? We contemplation. Now, remember the first part was to calm our mind. And then with that calm mind, you are objectively looking at things and contemplating. So therefore, it wouldn't be something you can do during sleep because you have to actively do something. So that'll be number one. Number two, please be very careful because when I first started doing serious meditation, and initially, I was under the misconception that you really have to master focusing and calming before we could contemplate, which was not accurate. When you do that, your mind frequency of thought slow down, then it's hard to drive in the US. So I wouldn't mess around with driving and meditating. Be aware. Now, Venerable Thanissaro Thero said that you can have a frame. So, in fact, if you are stuck at a traffic light and you have like multiple roads that you are looking at, you can broaden the frame. But to be honest with you, I wouldn't mess around with it. I kind of played around with those. So focus on the driving, but I wouldn't try to really fine tune your focus because that could be a dangerous thing to do, especially in this day and age. Did I
Yeah,
answer the question or did I
yeah,
make you more confused?
because sometimes like nowadays we have
Mm-hmm.
a lot of road rage, situation. So I find myself to be angry at times, right? And then after that I find myself taking a deep breath in and breathe out, and
Got
I
it.
focus myself again on the road. So
I see
in a
what you
way
mean.
I feel like I was meditating.
Yes. Now that is being mindful. Three things happen there. Number one, on a normal day, you will get mad, and not you, like as a whole, somebody does something bad on the road, and anger comes up naturally. It's a natural thing. But if you are mindful, which you are from what you said just now, you see anger, and then now we can actively stop and do something to eliminate the anger. And in the Buddhist philosophy and in some of the Buddhist literature, I put one slide, but I didn't really go into that. But basically, you can plan a set of actions. So if you say you have this person, each time you see that person, you are going to get angry. There are situations like that. So now you identified a precipitating factor, and then when you go home and when you are at peace, you can have a game plan. Next time I'm going to meet this person, this is the sequence. Maybe have compassion towards them, or maybe think of something else. In fact, even that is mentioned. Think of something else, and or think of the repercussions. You can have a game plan, but for you to have the game plan, you have to be aware that you got angry. And then you can do a post-mortem and say, if I'm in that situation again, how am I going to prevent myself from getting angry? And another explanation that is given, advice that is given, is if you start noticing, okay, interacting with this person constantly makes me angry, one of the best things is avoidance of the situation. So these are all practical things, but they all start with your that first statement you made, which is you become aware of a negative emotion. You have to become aware. So that is what Buddhist mindfulness is.
I think that's clear. The next one, does dreams mean the mind is working
Oh,
while sleeping and not resting?
I don't know the answer to that. I know the medical answer, but I have never been able to figure the two out together. So sorry, I don't know the answer to that.
Okay. Kathy, what about jogging, running? Do we meditate when we focus on running while listening to the music?
Yes, good question. Remember, your mission is to attain Nibbana, and it has two parts. Number one, you have to have a calm mind, and number two, with that calm mind, you look at your mind, right? So when you jog, run, or these famous football players, they say they go into the zone. All that is the step one, which is focusing and calming the mind. That will not lead to correcting the database. The correcting the database can only be done with contemplation. So understand what's happening, understand the two steps, then you will answer your own questions in the future.
Okay, so I guess, Doctor, going back to the question earlier, um, on this one,
Yes,
dreams mean.
I'd rather not because it'll just mess everything else that we talked about, and it's not a good answer. So I'd rather not talk about that. Sorry.
I think that's pretty much it.
Okay.
Um, let's see. Yeah. Okay.
All
Yep, I
right.
think that's pretty much it. With that, we conclude today's guest lecture, and we look forward to meeting you with more interesting topics like this in the coming weeks. Please contact us if you have an interesting and useful topic, and we would also like to invite you if you're interested in joining us in the weekly guest lecture series. Doctor, I would like to sincerely thank you again for kindly accepting DHAMMA USA invitation for the guest lecture series. We would love to have you as a guest lecturer again for the talk in the near future. May
Thank
you
you.
always be well, happy, and healthy.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Dhamma friends, let us keep our palms together close to our heart and pray that by the power of all the dana, sila, bhavana activities that we all have performed during our lifetime and during our whole course of samsara, become one united power and may it share with all the celestial beings. May all the wonderful celestial beings, including respectful Brahmas and Devas, and all sentient beings receive this merit and share this merit and be well, happy, and healthy wherever they are. May all our departed ones also receive this merit and be well, happy, healthy, and safe wherever they are. May all of us be able to live life peacefully, comfortably, and with good health. May all of us and all sentient beings be able to attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana, the absolute peace and happiness at the end of our samsara. Bhavantu Saba Mangalam, Rakantu Saba Dewata, Saba Buddha Nubawena, Sada Soti Bhavantu Te. Bhavantu Saba Mangalam, Rakantu Saba Dewata, Saba Dhamma Nubawena, Sada Soti Bhavantu Te. Bawatu Saba Mangalam, Rakantu Saba Dewata, Saba Sangha Nubawena Sada Soti Bhavantu Te. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. We will see you all again next week and have a great evening.
Thank you.